So Hello, greetings. Hello, top of the evening to you. Happy Sunday. As always, we sincerely hope that you are able to maintain your highest possible level of mental, spiritual, and physical health. And we encourage you to be optimistic. Better days are ahead. And just so glad that you decided to join us for this hour. Today, welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here with us. And we have an important topic today: why African liberation and not Black History Month. Before we get started, we always like to do our acknowledgments. We acknowledge that this is Indigenous people's land that we're on here in the Western Hemisphere. And so we always acknowledge the Indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, not as some distant, far off past people, but as a people who still live, breathe, and exist today, who still practice their traditional customs and ways of life, who still manifest themselves in various forms, whether it be people who call themselves Indigenous or Native or American Indian, or whether it be people who call themselves Mexicano or Chicano or Puerto Ricano. Whatever the case may be, you all, this land belongs to those folks. And they are not fighting for just recognition, the fact that it was stolen from them and just move forward. They are fighting for their land back. When they deny and turn down these offers the U.S. government makes to them for violating the Fort Laramie treaties and returning the Pahasapa or the Black Hills to them, or what you call Mount Rushmore, they have turned down millions of dollars in settlement offers because they want the land back. They don't want money, they want the land back. That's something for us Africans to get a much better understanding of. A lot of us are talking about putting a price tag on our suffering and getting a check for 528 years of suffering, which in our view is disgraceful. So we acknowledge the Indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. They want their land back and we want ours back. And if this is their land, then it can't be our land. So, we acknowledge that Africa is our land. And that doesn't mean that you have to move to Africa. A lot of us with our mentalities, we don't want you to go to Africa, infecting the African continent with all this backward ideology and practices that exist over here. But for those people who are open and wanting to, understand our real current and future connection to Africa, then we pay homage and respect to our African ancestors who have fought and struggled diligently for us to be able to be here today. They are the reason that we are here today. So we honor them all the time, every time we do this. And then we just wanted to point out two things quickly before we get started, rather. One is the sad report came out that Mumia Abu-Jamal has COVID and is suffering in the prison institution that he's in on the East Coast here in the United States. And if you don't know, Mumia Abu-Jamal has been in prison now for over 3 decades, going on 4 decades. And he was accused of shooting and killing a police officer. There's absolutely no evidence that he did that. He was a journalist in Philadelphia who had covered the MOVE organization. If you know that history, the city of Philadelphia bombed the MOVE organization's household. Mumia was an outspoken critique of the city of Philadelphia and its dark-skinned mayor at the time, Wilson Goode, who ordered the dropping of C4 on a house full of human beings in the city of Philadelphia, killing all of them except one person, Sister Ramona Africa. And because of that, Mumia was targeted and he ended up in prison, and he's been in prison ever since. And I know, there's a lot of confusion in this society, but for us, people like Mumia, those are our troops. That's who we thank for our service. Those are the only troops that we thank for our service. So we certainly have Brother Mumia in our thoughts today, and we hope that he is able to have a fast recovery, and we hope that we can get him out of prison. He shouldn't be there, just like Sundiata Acoli shouldn't be there. Mutulu Shakur shouldn't be there. Jamil Abdullah Alamin shouldn't be there. And if you don't know who those people are, shame on you, because we'll sit around and talk about Bill Cosby shouldn't be, you can throw the prison on top of Bill Cosby as far as I'm concerned. Those people I just mentioned are the people who sacrificed for our liberation. So that's why we speak of them with honor and respect. And so that's one thing we just wanted to put out before we begin. And then the other thing is, if you follow any of the headlines that come out of Africa, so there are 8 people in the country of Mali, West Africa, who have just filed a lawsuit against Cargill International, Hershey Chocolate, Nestle Chocolate, and any number of these Godiva, any number of these chocolate companies. And the reason why they're filing this lawsuit is, if you didn't know, if you look at that west region of Africa, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Mali, that little cluster of countries in that area there in West Africa, they produce about 90% of the cocoa on the world market today. And the cocoa industry, like every other industry, is extremely brutal and exploitative towards the African people who do the work there. You know, all we know is that we're eating a chocolate bar or chocolate something. We don't think about the struggle that was produced and the exploitation involved in producing that. So I just mentioned that because these folks are trying to file this lawsuit, and they're going up against, obviously, these large multinational corporations. But the point is that we always say here and everywhere we do our work, that this US capitalist economy is built on exploiting Africa. And this is just a clear example, you all, of how that manifests itself. And so the next time you're eating chocolate, just remember that. I'm not saying you can't enjoy chocolate, but just remember that everything that's here, all the wealth here is stolen. The land is stolen. The person talking to you right now is stolen. Everything in this society, look around your room you're in or wherever you are, everything is stolen. All the materials that went into whatever you're looking at is stolen. Everything is stolen. It's a stolen society. So with that, we'll go ahead and move into our introductions, because history is a tool to help us reclaim the knowledge so that we can correct the injustices that have been perpetuated against us. So we definitely want to do that. And we definitely want to talk about our title today in that context. So again, we thank you all for joining us. My name is Ajamu, a longtime organizer in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which is the organization that sponsors these weekly workshops. I've done work for the party all over the world, mostly throughout Africa. And if I have my way, I will continue to do that for as much time as I have left on the planet Earth. And then with me, I have my outstanding daughter, Shakura, who is in another part of the plantation here in this country, but has grown up in the All African People's Revolutionary Party and is on the verge of finishing up her doctorate degree. She'll be the first doctor in our family in communication, public health, with an emphasis on women's health. And we're going to hear a lot more from Shakura next month, Women's History Month, in these weekly workshops around these questions. Then going back to the All African People's Revolutionary Party, our objective is Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa. That's our objective. If you look at the book on the right, the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, the founder of our party, Kwame Nkrumah, wrote that book in 1968. And in that book, he lays out the strategy for achieving Pan-Africanism, or one unified socialist Africa. And he calls for the unification and the on-the-ground work of all Pan-African formations on the ground in Africa who agree with Nkrumah's call for one unified socialist Africa. So the people you see, the logos you see rather, the Pan-Africanist Congress, PAC, is an organization of hundreds, thousands of people, millions of people in Azania, or what you call South Africa, which is the colonial name. They are a part of this working fusion that we have going that Nkrumah called for, the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau. That's the governing party in Guinea-Bissau, or the PAIGC. They are millions of people, same thing there. The Democratic Party of Guinea, the Party of Sekou Touré, PDG, RDA, millions of people there. Azapo, the Azanian People's Organization in Azania again, Amilcar Cabral Ideological School, Nigeria, Zimbabwe Movement of Pan-African Socialists in Zimbabwe. Again, you know, you're talking about millions of people who are uniting together to form one fighting force to achieve one unified socialist Africa. So when we talk about Pan-Africanism, we're not just talking about a dream. I know that's what CBS and NBC and CIA want to make all of us believe. It's just a concept in our heads and it's not really real. But we're here to tell you it's on the ground work. And as I told you, I've had the honor to participate in a lot of that work. So we are moving forward. And also we are fortunate to engage in work to build chapters all over the world in relationships with other liberation movements, the Palestinian National Liberation Movement, Irish Republican Socialist National Liberation Movement, Filipino National Liberation Movement, and of course, indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We will continue to build, nurture, and support all of those relationships. So for today's topic, African Liberation Month, not Black History Month, we will start by turning it over to Shakura.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Daddy. I really appreciate that. And I just want to start off, of course, echoing my dad by saying we continue to hope that you all are hanging in there as best as you can. I know for me, it's getting rather difficult to hear about just so many people who are transitioning left and right. And so I'm trying to stay strong. And one of the things that I do to try to keep my head focused on that is I want to make sure that people who are dying so that I can continue on with their legacy. And so as my parents have instilled in me so nicely, I am here because I have a purpose, because someone sacrificed for me to be where I am. So I mean physically to be where I am, but I also mean emotionally and mentally and any other entity that you see and define yourself in terms of your identity. So I would encourage you to just continue to try to stay strong however you can, because we have a responsibility not just to our ancestors, but to our current brothers and sisters who are still physically living on this planet, to really make a better world and to make a difference. And that starts with helping to end oppression for all people, no matter what their race, class, or gender may be. And on that note, I just want to continue to highlight, I'm hoping that the people who decided to join tonight decided to join because the topic, or the title, I should say, of the presentation caught your attention, because this presentation is so important for a lot of different reasons. All of the seminars that the party gives have been crucial and significant in different ways. But I just want to continue to highlight that the specific reason that we chose this title is because we're trying to continue to reverse this narrative that has been shoved down all of our throats since we were born on this plantation. And that narrative is that Africans in America are separate from Africans from the continent. And that is not true by any means necessary. If you truly, truly think about it, the whole reason you are in fact African is because you descend from Africa. So when they teach us about quote, Black History Month, they're specifically using terms that separate Africans from the continent, because now that slavery is quote unquote over, that's, to be disputed, but whatever. Now that slavery is quote unquote over, we have this idea where we just have to assimilate and learn how to exist in this new world in America. And that means that we get to continue to not understand who we are. That means we get to continue to not learn who we are, because colonialization and capitalization beat that out of us, literally and mentally. Okay, but we need to push back against that, brothers and sisters. We need to not be afraid to be connected to Africa. We need to go get passports if we have privileges and money and income and resources to do those things. And we need to buy plane tickets and go home, because no one can tell you who you are unless you yourself have done the research. And why would you allow someone to tell you who you are? Why would you be okay with that? That's not okay to me. That is very much unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. So I don't call it Black History Month. I call it African history, because no matter where slavery made us land, wherever we were in Jamaica or Miami or Cuba or wherever, we are African. And that's what our brother Nkrumah talks about in Class Struggle. So I just want us to continue to remember that. Continue to remember that any contribution that any African made to make the world a better place, we should all celebrate. And we should not be dividing ourselves, because we all come from the continent. Malcolm X was, of course, correct when he talked about history being the best weapon to confront our oppression. Consequently, as students of history, we must always recognize the critical importance of Carter G. Woodson's call to commemorate Negro History Week and how that practice evolved into what is now recognized as Black History Month every February throughout the US. The issue we plan to bring into consciousness during this session is twofold. First, the practical purpose of history is for it to provide a mechanism for a people to understand what has happened to them so that they can understand what is happening to them, so that they can understand how to shape what will happen for them. That sentence is so important, I'm going to repeat it. The purpose of this presentation is twofold. First, the practical purpose of history is for us to provide a mechanism for people to understand what has happened to them so that they can understand what is happening to them, so that they can understand how to shape what will happen for them. As a result, history is a collective tool designed for collective advancement. It's never an individualistic design that just focuses on token advancement. In other words, if history is not serving as a vehicle to advance the masses of people forward and out of oppressive conditions, then it isn't serving much of a purpose. This is why students in school have absolutely no interest in studying US history. They don't know the specifics. They don't know the they don't know the contents, but they are intelligent entities, so they have to be able to figure out that the stories that are forced to digest about individualistic advancement, for example, George Washington as the founding father, etc., makes absolutely no logical sense. This is an example of the bourgeoisie method in which history is taught and managed within a capitalist society, where truth and justice are just 100% divorced from day-to-day material reality. Next slide, please. Our critical issue with what this so-called, quote, Black History Month, end quote, has become is that instead of our history serving as a liberatory tool, our history has been institutionalized, diminished, reduced, dismissed, marginalized, and trivialized into a collection of disconnected stories about the individualistic and token advancements of certain individuals who have advanced within the bourgeoisie capitalist system. Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, Ice Cube, the petty bourgeois, and the bourgeois. The message is clear. All of us have one mission: to pursue embracing the backward capitalist system and integrating within it. Survival, brothers and sisters. That has been shoved down our throats since the beginning of our conception on this soil. Any effort intentionally or accidentally to express our collective history, i.e. the work of the people like Kwame Nkrumah and the Convention People's Party, Sekou Touré and the Democratic Party of Guinea, Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale and the Black Panther Party, Kwame Touré and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Black Panthers, AAPRP, etc., is presented from a framework of, quote, they tried, they died, end quote. And just don't worry about that, what they've done beyond that. Just work on claiming your stake within the capitalist system. In fact, we would argue that every February 28th or 29th, the month-long message each year is, quote, what steps have you taken to integrate yourself further within the capitalist system, end quote. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shakura, for that wonderful foundation that you've laid out for us. And I think a lot of what Shakura was talking about, you all, is characterized within the framework of this question of class struggle among African people. So a lot of times, if you interact with any people, but I'm just using African people, for example, if you interact with us, a lot of people have a pretty good understanding of race consciousness. And what I mean by that is people can tell you, yeah, white supremacy is oppressing us, and that's a problem. But when we start to interject the question of class consciousness, then the conversation is much more difficult to have, because it's much easier for people to see African people as a monolith or all the same. But the reality is that we have never all been the same, and we will never be all the same in terms of our ideologies, in terms of what actions we're pursuing and what interests we are working for. And that's a struggle, that's a fight. That class struggle that happens is a fight. So you have to understand this history. Like if you look at the history of this society, when you had 300 cities in this country burning up in 1968 after the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and a lot of those urban rebellions were happening even before he was murdered, just because of the general oppression that our people experienced. The Johnson administration in 1967 put together a commission called the Kerner Commission. And the purpose of the Kerner Commission was to study the race problem in this society. And the Kerner Commission went and did extensive research. You should go and read the report. It's actually quite comprehensive. And what they did in that report from 1967 is they laid out all of the inequities of white supremacy under the capitalist system. And they gave recommendations. And the recommendations they gave were that solutions needed to be imposed to address the rampant poverty, and white supremacist practices and policies, or else they would continue to be unrest in this society. That's what they said. So as a result of that, when the Nixon administration came into being in 1968, they created this group of ruling class bourgeoisie stakeholders. McGeorge Bundy, who was president of the Chevron Foundation, David Rockefeller, whose family still to this day owns controlling interests in Chase Manhattan Bank, a bank started from enslaving our ancestors, seed money. That's where they got started. Chevron Oil, which is a major exploiting oil company in Africa, and that's how they, they're one of the ruling class families, the Rockefeller family, and people from the Nixon administration. So this group got together and they came up with this concept of affirmative action, and the purpose of affirmative action, in their words, not ours. It's not the All African People's Revolutionary Party saying this. If you study the words of McGeorge Bundy, McGeorge Bundy, if you study his words, he talked about it was necessary, and Nixon talked about this too. Nixon talked about the need for Black capitalism. It was necessary to create a buffer class of African people who would serve the interests of directing the masses of African people towards loyalty to this system. And that was Nixon and Bundy's own words about the creation of an African petty bourgeoisie class. And we talked about this in depth. You can look at the video on YouTube when we had the session on the Black bourgeoisie. But the point just for this part of this discussion for today is that this is how you got to set aside contracts, minority contracts. This is how you got affirmative action in college admissions, affirmative action in government jobs. This is how you got all this. But the purpose of this was never to create advancement for the masses of African people. There was never any design or vision about using these tools to do that. It was always only about creating a few African petty bourgeoisie and bourgeoisie who would serve the purpose of being overseers over the masses of African people. And that's important for us to, I know that's a hard pill for a lot of us to swallow, but the evidence is overwhelming. Like there really isn't an argument against that. And it's important to understand that, because if you understand that, then you will understand that these people, Ice Cube, Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, yeah, they might say or do some things that we can benefit from, but when push comes to shove, and it's a question of the masses of African people or the interests of the capitalist US empire, every single time, 100% of the time, they're going to fall on the side of the capitalist empire. And we have to understand that, you all. If we don't understand that, we'll forever be confused, frustrated, saying the same thing every time, pushing the same thing every time, which is, and expecting a different result, which of course we know is the definition of insanity. So this class struggle within the African community in this country and the world is devastating, you all, and we've got to understand that, so we can understand that, you know, just because you're looking at someone that looks like you does not mean they represent your interests. Even if they say the right things, sometimes it still doesn't mean that. And so this petty bourgeoisie, middle managers of the capitalist system, right, they've been elevated into this position to become mouthpieces for our people. And so everything that we have, everything that we've produced has come from struggle in the society. There's no exception to that. Everything that we have produced has come out of our struggle to be free. And Negro History Month in 1915 from Carter G. Woodson evolved into Black History Month in the 1970s. And the purpose of this was to say that we need to recognize our history, because our history is a history of struggle against this backward system. And that was the purpose. But if you study what Carter G. Woodson said in his book, his landmark book, The Miseducation of the Negro, there's absolutely no debate about what I just said. But what has quote unquote Black History Month become? It's not today, I would argue, especially from these mouthpieces that, you know, supposedly represent our people, some of these individuals that we've named, people like Kamala Harris, it's no longer coming from those people a tool for us to assess how we become stronger in fighting against this oppressive system, but it's now become this thing where we have to celebrate a few Negroes integrating into the capitalist system. And if they did it, then that means you can do it. So all you have to do is emulate them and you can get into the system. You can start a business, you can get rich, you can do all the things that this system represents that are built on the backs of our people. But you can do the same thing. And instead of you just being exploited, you can begin to learn how to be an exploiter yourself. And so that's the message, that so many good people are just kind of in autopilot and just have just accepted. And corporations have come to sponsor Black History Month and promote that message. And that message has become normalized. It's become the dominant message. Like, people aren't even talking about Black History Month, quote unquote, as a tool to help us struggle for our freedom and liberation anymore. People are talking about it, celebrate. Well, we got so many Negroes that are in government now. We got this now. We got that now. We got this individual that did this. And so this has become how it's been normalized to interpret it, which has nothing to do with advancing the masses of our people. That's our argument. And meanwhile, you know, the true revolutionary voices that promoted the concept of us understanding and respecting our history so that it can be used, as Malcolm X told us, as the best method to reward our research, instead of it being that, and those voices who are genuinely speaking about our need to advance and organize for justice and forward liberation, those voices are completely marginalized. Like the voices you're hearing right here, right now, completely marginalized. You know, people from this petty bourgeoisie and bourgeoisie African class, they hear the way we're talking right now. They're like, well, those people are crazy. They're just talking like that because they're angry. You don't need to listen to that. What you need to do is put your head down and just move forward in the grindstone. Just work hard, get an education. When the police stop you, just say, yes, sir, no, sir. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Yes, people, no, people. And don't ever challenge anything. Just move forward in this system, get you a house, and just do that track. And don't listen to all those people. They're insane. That's the dominant, we would argue, perspective right now. So, you know, let's take a second to look at these pictures on the left, if you would, because this is what the result has been of what we're talking about. So now what's been normalized is the commodification of African struggle. So US capitalist corporations and capitalist corporations all over the world have figured out that they can get out in front of our legitimate liberation struggle, which has only one purpose, and that's to overthrow them. Because if you ever have listened to anything we have to say, you know that companies like Apple, which produce that red, black, and green watch you see in the upper left-hand corner there, Apple makes a large percentage of their profits brutally exploiting our people in the Congo for the cobalt, which makes, cell phones and the iPhone and the laptop, MacBook Pro, and those things work, right? Flat screen TVs. So, Apple is a thief. They steal African resources, exploit African human and material resources, give nothing back to the African masses that they're stealing from. But they have learned that instead of you being able to see that and see them for who they are, they can get out in front of it and they can produce this product. And they can convince you that, well, no, see, we care about you. We care about your history. And because of that, we want you to pay $29.99, whatever it costs, for this red, black, and green watch. And that's demonstrating to you that we care about your history and your struggle as a people in the society. And we're going to make even more money from you in the process. And a lot of us just kind of just on autopilot accept that. And we don't ever think about the fact that this is the same strategy they're using with Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill and Malcolm X on the postage stamp. Now, I can tell you, if you study Harriet Tubman, if you study Malcolm X, and stop watching these movies, but actually study what these people represented, then you would know that neither one of them would want to be honored by this government for anything. Malcolm X didn't want to be on no U.S. postage stamp. Malcolm X wanted to destroy the U.S. empire. Harriet Tubman didn't want to be on. Harriet Tubman was an advisor in the Civil War. Most of us don't know this. All we know is she helped 300 slaves escape. We don't even know she was an advisor to Ulysses S. Grant's government. If it wasn't for Harriet Tubman's intel work with Grant and the North would have never defeated Robert E. Lee in the South in the Civil War. She understood the contradictions of this society and that this society was built on slave labor. She didn't want to be on this money, because the only people that are on U.S. money are murderers and killers, each and every one of them. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson was a murderer of indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. That's how he got his claim to fame, murdering indigenous people. That's how you get on money. The only way you're on money, the only way you have streets and schools named after you in this country is because you murder hundreds of thousands and millions of African people and indigenous people. That's the only way you qualify to have that quote unquote honor. Harriet Tubman, it shows you how insane we are that we think it's some sort of advancement and progress for her to be on the money with those crooks and criminals. George Washington owned African people as property. And some of y'all, he was our founding father. He might have been your father, but not the way you're thinking about, because all he did was go around and exploit African women and have children everywhere. So Harriet Tubman wouldn't have wanted to be on that stinking money. Yeah, we have to use the money because we're not in power yet. We're fighting to gain power. But that doesn't mean because you have to use something that you have to honor the fact that you're using. I mean, that's only insane people that think like that. If you're in jail, you don't honor the jail cell. You do everything you can to try to get out of the jail, even though you have to spend the night there every day. So these things are not, for you, they might be, you might see them as things that are honoring us. But what we're saying to you all, family, is that these things exist to confuse us and to make us believe that this system is standing beside us and standing behind us and working to support us in our march for freedom. But our march for freedom is about confronting the systems that oppress us, and that's this empire. So they can't ever stand by us and behind us and with us. And they know that. So that's why they're trying to get out in front of it so they can confuse you into thinking that they're standing with us. Because then if you think that, you won't make any kind of moves against them. And that's their whole objective. So yeah, you have Luka Doncic there in the bottom picture. If you don't know who that is, he's a professional basketball player in the National Basketball Association in the NBA. Very good, from Croatia, out very extremely good. But you see him wearing the shirts there that they're wearing. So, you know, these entities like the NBA want to, again, convince you that they are concerned about African liberation. But you forget the fact that last summer, the NBA players were ready to strike. Do y'all remember that? LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, they voted to strike. And they had major influence because of their star status in the league over the rest of the players. And so a lot of the players they had a meeting, closed door meeting, Giannis Antetokounmpo, all of them. And they were Kyle Lowry. They were talking Chris Paul, who's over the union, the players. So they were talking about, we're not going to play a single playoff game because of the killing of George Floyd. So y'all forget all this. And what happened, because I know some of you get so upset when we talk about Obama because, you love you some Obama. But what happened with that is they were going to have a labor strike in the NBA. That would have been unprecedented had that happened. And here comes your boy, Obama, and no, you don't need to strike. Don't strike, vote. That's what he told them. So everything was called off, and you had your election, and you got in the capitalist you wanted, defeated the other capitalist you didn't want. The fox, as Malcolm X said, defeated the wolf. And now you're happy. You've made some sort of progress. I don't think the Syrian people would agree with you who are being bombed into submission right now. I don't think they would agree with you, but we don't look that deep into it. So we can't be confused by this symbolism, you all. We can't be confused by the efforts by this system to get out in front of us. That's what they always do, and confuse us about what's really going on. They want us to see history as something dead that simply represents us gradually, individually integrating into this system, and no efforts being made to liberate us from this system. That's their objective. So also another element of that is quote unquote Black History Month, as Shakur mentioned, completely separates us from Africa, completely separates us from Africa. And because we're separated from Africa, meaning we don't know anything about Africa, and again, Africans get mad here when we talk like this. But the truth is, like, y'all know, you ain't read no books on Africa, and only about 8% of the Africans in the US even have passports. We're not talking about people in the military, because you didn't make the decision to get that passport to travel to Africa. You had to have the white supremacist capitalist power structure make that decision for you. So you don't get any credit for that. But of the people who are adults who went and got passports so they can travel, only 8% of us here. So that means 92% of us have no intention of going anywhere, not to mention Africa. So we don't know anything about Africa. So that's why you get this confusion, like, well, the US there's anti-Blackness. The only anti-Blackness that exists in this society is because this society was built and is maintained on exploiting Africa. And because it needs African cheap mineral resources and labor to survive, like Apple, like Samsung, like Shell Oil, like Chevron, like De Beers Diamonds, like Hershey, Nestle, Cargill, quote unquote, Firestone, Goodyear. The entire capitalist economy is built on exploiting African human and material resources. They have to keep African people in this society oppressed. That's what that's about. There's no anti-Blackness because of the color of our skin. If you read Socrates, Aristotle, Pythagoras, the so-called great Greek philosophers, they all went and studied in Mali. I just told you our people in Mali are filing a lawsuit against the cocoa companies now. Mali is where the world's first university is, Timbuktu. And those crooks and thieves went there to study. They learned philosophy and rhetoric and debate skills from Africa. That's where they got it from. So they know Africa was a high level of civilization. They know there's no anti-Blackness. All Europeans are trying to do is look like us and talk like us and dress like us and dance like us. That's not what it is. It's Africa. But because we don't know anything about Africa, we don't have the ability to make that connection. And because the people who control how we look at our history, their agenda is to separate us from Africa, then they just tell us, well, it's Black history. Get Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill, and we accept that. Oh yeah, that's progress. That's progress for us. And all they do is sit behind closed doors and laugh at us, you all. They laugh at us. And you know what? They have a right to laugh at us. We're that easily confused. They should be laughing at us. And they will continue to laugh at us until we wake up. So, we have to create this culture where we can push back on all this nonsense. We should be offended that they use our soldiers for justice to represent their system. A system that they hated Malcolm X. The US government killed Malcolm X. How the hell are they going to have him on a US government postal stamp? That makes absolutely no sense. How is Apple going to be celebrating African history when they profit off of African exploitation in Africa and around the world? How are they going to be celebrating Harriet Tubman? Like, this is an insult, you all. So it's never going to change. Like Frederick Douglass said, there is no progress without struggle. It is never going to change until we force it. Nobody's going to respect us until we respect ourselves. As long as we sit around here talking about, well, we should get Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill, that's progress for us. Then all we're doing is playing into somebody else's narrative about what we should be about. I would never want anybody that represents us on any blood money. Every piece of money in this society is blood money, you all. Nobody can dispute that. So we have to understand it and start pushing back. So this question of how do we do this has to do with how do we facilitate a change in consciousness among our people? Like, how do we do that? Again, like we're arguing here, you all, that we have to push back against this petty bourgeoisie analysis. And I know a lot of you listening to this are vehemently opposed to what I just said because you're a part of the petty bourgeoisie class. And some of you, I'm not antagonistic towards you because I know how the system works. And how the system works is we go to college. They opened up the opportunity for us to go to college to create a to enlarge. We always had a petty bourgeoisie, but it was very small, just like it's still small in Africa today and in other countries where Africans are today. And this country used to be small also. But what I described for you at the beginning, where they created affirmative action, the whole point of that was to increase the petty bourgeoisie. And so those of us who came up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, etc., we have had the opportunity to go to college. And I did that. I went to college. I got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. Shakura is about to get her PhD. So we understand education. We don't need you to tell us how important education is. We understand it better than you do. But what we're saying is that our objective, the reason why our people fought for us to get education is so we could use knowledge to liberate our people. So yes, we are challenging you if you interpret it the way the capitalist system intended for you to interpret it, that your job is to get in a position and create and perpetuate some kind of tokenism where, we get one person in a position of leadership and we act like that's some sort of progress when it means nothing for the masses of our people. And the people who get in there are only committed to us to the extent that it doesn't challenge the status quo of this system. The minute it does that, they have to side with the system every single time. That's not progress, you all. So we have to say no to this petty bourgeoisie narrative, and we have to say yes to education being a tool to create a revolutionary African intelligentsia, people with knowledge and skills who use those skills to advance the collective environment of African people on a collective level, on a mass level. And the only way that that can happen is that struggle is about moving us against this empire, not integrating us into it. And so if you have education, great. But if you're sitting around waiting for somebody to tell you what to do, not great. The whole purpose of you getting the education is so that you could think and make decisions. Not that you're a leader of the people, but you should be able to spark something. You should be able to get something started where you can help people become leaders. That's the whole point of you getting an education. And if you're not using your education for that, if all you're using it for is to advance yourself individually, then you're working in the interests of our enemies against our people. That's just irrefutable. So we have to reclaim history from the dead pile that these people have put it in and make it what it's supposed to be, a weapon for our empowerment and our collective forward progress. What is the point of studying the Black Panther Party? You know, I saw one of these NBA games and they had a picture. It was really weird. I was watching, I think it was the Lakers playing the Clippers. I was watching the game and I saw on the digital board, they had a picture of Huey P. Newton. And I'm like, what the hell? Like Huey P. Newton at an NBA game. Okay. And I know some of you like, well, that's great because people who don't know who Huey P. Newton is, they got to see his picture. Well, if symbolic progress is enough for you, yeah, that's outstanding. But for those of us who want to take a scientific approach to our oppression and solve it, then we know that just people seeing a picture of Huey P. Newton when they don't have the capacity and or desire to study his work, understand the great contributions that he made, certainly interpret the errors and complete devastating problems that a lot of what he did created, and don't have the ability to assess that in an objective way so that we can take the good that he gave us and learn to leave alone the bad so that we can move forward. We know that just seeing a picture of him doesn't provide us with that. The only way we get all of that is we have to be involved in our own struggle. We can't be sitting here expecting our enemies to show us a picture and then we're going to get it that way. So that's why we say that the way we do. We have to learn how to get control of our history back. Because what is, again, the purpose of the Black Panther Party if we don't study them and do what I just said so that we can move forward for that? What's the point of knowing about them? There isn't any point. It's just dead history. It's in the dead pile if we don't do any of that. And because we have the situation we have today where history is being dominated by petty bourgeoisie thought, that's why some of you got pictures of Malcolm X in your house and on your desk at work. You wear Asada taught me shirts, and nothing about anything about your life is about carrying on the work of Malcolm X or the Black Panther Party or Assata Shakur. Nothing about your life is about, in fact, everything you're doing is opposed to everything that they stood for. And the only reason how that could happen, that kind of dichotomy could happen, is because we don't control our history. We don't control it. We've allowed it to be stolen from us by this capitalist system. And so now you can do anything. You can buy a red, black, and green watch from Apple and you're celebrating our history. That kind of confusion. If aliens landed here 100 years from now and saw this, they would have to shake their heads and say, what the hell was wrong with those people? So we got to wake up, you all. We got to wake up and understand this confusion. So just want to say that, again, we're not saying, because some of us only hear what we want to hear. And like I said, revolutionary voices are systemically marginalized in this society. And so as a result of that, the training that everybody has is the capitalist system. It's like the sun. There's no alternative. There's nothing else except it. And that's how people view it. Even if you don't think about it, that's how you view it, is that there's no alternative to capitalism. Capitalism has always been here. I'll give you an example. This is how people think. So people say things like, well, you can't eliminate police. Like, if you look at that statement in a historical sense, there's very few things that can be said that are more insane than that statement, because human beings have existed for millions of years, and human society, where societies have been organizing on some sort of collective level, have existed for a minimum of 200,000 years. Police departments, which evolved out of the slave system in the southern US, have only been around for 150 years. So you really have to explain to me how the hell we are in this place today where people actually believe there's no way we can exist without police departments. You have to be out of your mind, or at least you certainly don't know history. So that's the same type of backward logic that exists with the capitalist system. It's all there is, and we don't investigate it, so we think that that's all there ever has been, and consequently, that's all there ever will be. So there's nothing we can do except exist and listen to voices who advance advancement within the capitalist system. So anybody like us that comes and says something that clearly conflicts with that, your training is to think that we're insane. And we understand it, and we're not offended because we know we're not insane. You know, my mother used to say to me all the time when I was a child, the crazy people are the people who act like they got it all together. And the people who are the people that you want to put your most faith in are the people who know they're on the verge of insanity. And I understand that better, much better now than I did back when she said it to me when I was a child, because I know that what she was saying to me is that when I walk by a houseless person, if I step over them and keep going, every time I do something like that, when I walk by any type of abuse, when I see poverty, when I see disrespect, when I walk by the police pulling over people and harassing them, and I don't have the ability to do anything to stop that, I lose part of my humanity. I lose part of my sanity. You don't necessarily have to be aware of that, but there's no question about that. Even mental health professionals will tell you this. You lose a part of your humanity, you are a part of your sanity. So the important thing is to understand that in this system, you're on the verge of insanity every day. And a big part of that insanity is us walking around here acting like capitalism is the end all be all and there'll never be anything better. There have been constant changes in dominant economic existences over the last several thousands of years. And there is nothing happening that leads us to believe that that will somehow magically cease to exist. Capitalism is on its last legs. So we just have to understand that. And the way we understand that, again, is we have to be engaged in organizations that are involved in struggling around political education. So we're going to tell you that you should join an organization. We're going to always tell you that. We know that we say it all the time, and you're like, why do they say that all the time? I get sick of hearing them say that. But you don't say that when McDonald's says, you don't say that about that because you're so accustomed to being propagandized by McDonald's, you just think that's a part of life. But because, again, we've been conditioned that when revolutionaries speak, put your defense up, be on guard against that. Those people are insane. The minute we say something, you immediately are trained to react against it. So you don't want to hear us say, join an organization. You don't want to hear that because that's holding you accountable. And you don't want to be accountable. Most of us don't want to be accountable. All we want to do is just get on the internet, say whatever kind of insane things we want, not be accountable to any of our people suffering. We don't want that. And when we say join an organization, you can't just do that. Now you're responsible to something. And most of us, we just don't have we're just not mature enough to do that. But we got to figure out how to gain that maturity. And we can't just continue to see the world through our trauma. If you need, there's a lot of trauma. I know that because I've been the survivor of a ton of trauma in my life. But I also, because of that, know that I cannot let my trauma define my existence in this world. And it certainly can't color my lens for how I contribute to this struggle for justice and liberation. So we're not going to excuse us, but we're not going to let you use your trauma to color how we should struggle for justice. If you need help dealing with your trauma, then you should get that. And we should organize community defense networks to help you have the resources to do that. But that's not the methodology in which we move forward. We have to have a healthy and objective perspective that's based in clear history, that this system was built on our backs and we're going to be oppressed until we organize and overthrow this system. So we just want to say, join an organization. You can join the All African People's Revolutionary Party if you're African. We would love to have you. We would love to talk to you about it. Don't get scared because you don't know, y'all know, listening to this, you don't know anything about Africa. You don't have anything about collective people. You certainly don't know what revolution is. So there's no reason for you to be afraid because you don't even understand what we're talking about when we say All African People's Revolutionary Party. You just know, all you know is the capitalist system has programmed you to react against those words. That's it. Even though you haven't read no books on revolution, no books on Africa, no books on collective people organizing, nothing. So that should tell you that somebody's planted something in there. Like you worried about a chip being planted in you. They already done planted the chip with 12 years of misinformation and education in the backward so-called education system that exists in this society. They don't need to put no chip inside you. That's just the finishing touches on it. So don't be afraid of that. You know, come and let us explain to you about our work and what we're doing. And if you don't want to join up with us, no problem. We will just tell you join some organization working for justice. And so you can go to AAPRP-INTL.org, AAPRP-INTL.org on your screen there, and you can get more information. And a lot of you are doing that, and that's great. Let's please keep that up. And then my blog, if you want to reach out to me and cuss, or, you know, I don't know, maybe you're some of those people who make threats on there. I get a lot of those threats, and that's fine, because Secretary was correct when he said, if the enemy isn't doing anything against you, it's because you're not doing anything. So that is not a concern for us when that happens. But there's also a lot of good blog articles. You can watch all these videos. They're all housed there. If you want to go to abetterworld.me, that's all there. And our upcoming events are there. And you can find out information about, you know, the books that I've written if you're interested in that. And then the hoodcommunist.org. I'm an editor on the editor board there. It's an outstanding collective. I'm fortunate enough to have writings on there. There's some outstanding writings on there about African women and feminism, this week. That's on there right now. So go to hoodcommunist.org and look at that. And I actually have an article I wrote on there. It's about how Zionism, the political movement of Zionism, has manipulated African movements. So you can read those on there. So go check it out. And lastly, I just want to talk about my, I recently released this 76-page manifesto you see there on the right, a guide for defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence. It's a very comprehensive read. A lot of people are buying it, which I appreciate it. I want to try to do whatever can be done to elevate that to people getting in study groups, because my goal for writing this, I've spent 3 years writing it. My goal is to get these ideas out there so that people are talking about them in a way that spreads. So it's great if you bought it and you're reading it individually, appreciate that. But again, we're trying to build collective organizations. So if you read it and you liked it, and I know if you read it, you liked it because it's good. We put a lot of work into our work. Then find some other people and read it with them and build something. And again, as we always say, we'll put it out there. If you want help building something, we'll help you do that. We'll give you our templates, because that's what we're trying to do. But the information in that manifesto is about how you get together with people and organize neighborhoods, what you do, what kind of decision-making processes you can put in place, how you can organize political education on a block-by-block basis in neighborhoods, how you resolve contradictions, how do you get resources to train people in conflict de-escalation and self-defense and all of these things. How do you stop police terrorism and misogynistic violence? That's what this manifesto is about. So you should check it out. You can only get it through Amazon because there's no, there just aren't any sources of printing revolutionary Pan-Africanist literature, but it's a template that, you know, certainly African people can use and all people can use to organize in our communities. And that's what we're about. And I hope you can do that. And I hope you can join us for the book release event for that, which is going to be on April 4th. You see in the flyer there on these same channels. You're actually just going to use this same format for that book event. And we're going to do, you know, next month, we're going to have this program, a laser focus on African women's health issues. March is African Women's History Month. And so you're going to hear a lot more from Shakura next month, who obviously is studying for her doctorate on women's health issues. So she has a lot of valuable information that you're definitely not going to want to miss. And we're going to be talking about a lot of those issues next month. So a lot more from her, a lot less from me, which will probably make some of you happy. And that's fine. because I'm not in this for my ego. If I was, I would be doing a whole lot more than what I do. I'm in this because I want to be free and I want you to be free. So we thank you for joining us. Please go out and buy the book and use it to organize with. Whatever money comes from it is just going back to the people. If you study us, you already know that. So help us do this work. And we appreciate you coming in and participating today, as we always appreciate you coming and participating with us. And we ask you to join us next week. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Forward ever. You can reach out to me at abetterworld.me if you like, but forward ever, backwards never. Always stay strong, you all. We love you. Smash patriarchy. Build one unified socialist Africa. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.